On April 18th, the murder of his wife, Missy, occurred at that Midlothian church. First on Fox 4 tonight, Richard Ray with his reaction to evidence tonight, both new and old. Richard.
Hello guys and welcome. In this video we're going to be going over the unusual case of Missy Bevers. It's a fairly straightforward yet strange case, still unsolved after 4 years. Missy Bevers, mother of 3, was a 45-year-old fitness trainer, living in Red Oak, Texas. In the early morning of April 18th, 2016, she was found bludgeoned to death in the church in which she led an early morning fitness class. As you can see on the security footage taken inside the church, the killer, strangely dressed in full police SWAT gear, is seen at 3:58 a.m. though they were likely at or inside the church quite a bit before then. The killer is seen casually walking around the church, opening doors, and occasionally hitting things. Missy arrives shortly after 4 a.m. in order to prepare her 5 o'clock class, and she'd later be found by some of her students shortly before 5 a.m. The scene was horrific. Missy had puncture wounds to the head and chest, consistent with the tool or weapon the killer is seen carrying. An ambulance was called, but Missy was pronounced dead at the scene. Now, there have been a few theories floating around about the killer's intentions, who they were, and what their connection was, if any, to Missy. One theory was that this was a burglary gone wrong. This doesn't seem likely, in my eyes. There were very few things taken, and as you can see in the CCTV footage, the suspect doesn't seem to be in a rush to get in or out, as you might expect in a standard burglary. In fact, you could say they seem to be simply passing the time, until their target, Missy, arrived. Another theory was that this was some kind of a paid hit. This, again, to me doesn't seem too likely, considering firstly how sloppy and unprofessional the whole thing seemed, and secondly how brutal the murder was. It was a vicious and almost personal attack, and seemed to be fueled by hatred, meaning it's likely in my eyes to be someone she knew or that knew her. A professional killing would probably be a lot cleaner, and a burglar might even try to escape instead of tacking on a murder charge to their bill. The brutal and painful way in which she was killed, beaten to death with a hammer, seems to be a crime of passion. Another theory was that this was a disgruntled, rejected fan or stalker of Missy. The suspect seen in the CCTV footage seems to be short, overweight, and with a limp or physical ailment of some kind. Prime attributes for rejection from a fairly fit, physically attractive woman such as Missy. Maybe someone took one of her classes, became a little too forward and overbearing, and when Missy rejected them, they didn't take it too well. These are all technically theories, as the real killer and therefore the real motivation and connection is still unknown. Now, the setup the killer chose to wear is unusual to say the least. He or she is dressed head to toe in what seems to be police SWAT gear. Now, as some people have pointed out, it isn't quite a perfect setup. The gear seems to be ill-fitted, missing some obvious signs and symbols of an official uniform, and if it weren't for the emblazoned police on the back, one might mistake it for any general heavy gear. While the disguise is strange in and of itself, the idea behind this getup seems fairly logical, for a few reasons. Firstly, as protection. It likely stopped any damage to the attacker if Missy fought back. While superficial, damage like kicks, bites, or scratches can often be used to identify suspects. Secondly, it also provides a disguise, in that it hides a lot of the features that someone might be identified by. Their face, their exact body shape, their exact walk and speed, their gender, etc. This is useful if they knew they were going to be on camera, which they were. And thirdly, it could have been used as a tool of authority. Missy had a carrying license, and in fact brought her gun with her to the church that morning, though unfortunately she left it in the car. If she did have it on her, however, the police outfit might have convinced Missy long enough for the killer to get close enough to attack her. One theory was the killer made it look like a robbery, not for the police, as the killer more than likely knew there were cameras there, but rather for Missy. If she saw the signs of a break-in, someone with police on their outfit, spoken with authority, might conceivably be able to fool her into believing they're a member of the police force that means her no harm. Now, while there wasn't any footage of a getaway car outside the church, there was very suspicious footage of a thought-to-be rental Nissan Altima circling the nearby church car park roughly 2 hours before the murder. This car park was only a few hundred meters down the road, and would make perfect sense for both scouting out the church and surrounding area prior to the murder. as well as a means of getaway afterwards. And if this simply was a lost civilian, they have yet to come forward. There were a few suspects named and even investigated, but most had alibis for the time of the killing. One natural suspect was Missy's husband, Brandon. Now, the two were said to have had financial issues as well as potential marital issues. Missy had an affair up to 10 months ago, Brandon said, at which point she cut it off and they had been working through it. Police, however, found flirtatious messages between Missy and an unnamed individual fairly recently, but we're not too sure if these are the same people. As with most murder investigations, the police questioned the husband, but to no avail. He had a very strong alibi for the morning of the 18th, as he was over 600 miles away on a fishing trip. Another suspect was a security guard who worked for the church. He had a similar gait to the suspect on camera, but was released from questioning after police were satisfied it wasn't him. He was also quite a bit taller than the suspect in the videos, though some people say that the camera distorted the footage, making the height of the suspect unclear, but that seems like a bit of a stretch. Now, the last major suspect that seemed to get everyone's attention was Brandon's father. He was around the same height as the suspect in the videos, he is seen to have a very similar limp or gait to the killer, and he brought a bunch of bloodied clothes to the dry cleaners right after the murder took place. He said it was dog's blood, and it was, strangely enough. On top of that, he was in California at the time of the murder, though that stance and walk is eerily similar to the murderer. Now, Brandon and his father weren't frequent travelers, and the fact that both of them were hundreds of miles away, both with solid alibis at the time of the killing, seems a bit odd. The clearly suspicious but ultimately innocent dog's blood, the obvious gait on the killer after going to so much effort to hide their identity, the seemingly clear motive for Brandon and by extension possibly his family to commit this crime, yet the ironclad alibis they had, all screams of misdirection, smoke and mirrors. Perhaps the killer intended to frame the security guard by imitating his unusual gait. Perhaps the killer intended to frame Brandon's father, or Brandon's father was in on it, and he instructed the killer to imitate his gait, knowing full well he'd have a bulletproof alibi. There are so many questions and possible theories, none of which fully add up, which makes this case a little less straightforward than it at first seems. The husband, Brandon, has been quoted as saying that Missy didn't know her killer, which is a strange thing to say when you think about it. He is also seen to be fairly calm a short while after the killing, claiming he had been busy taking care of the kids and he hadn't had time for the shock to take effect yet. Now, while this is certainly a plausible occurrence, not everyone feels emotions in the same way, especially with big traumas, it's definitely something to note. Police have had no major headway in the past 4 years. They do get tips every now and then, often around the anniversary and when TV specials of this event are aired, but nothing has led to any breakthroughs thus far. It certainly seems motivated and targeted, but with no witnesses, DNA evidence, or hard evidence, this might indeed be a cold case for quite some time. And that is it for the Missy Bevers case and for this video. If you enjoyed it, feel free to drop a like, they're greatly appreciated. And if you want to stay up to date on any videos I put out, subscribe. It won't kill you. Don't let this video scare you too much, and as always guys, thanks for watching.